I want to take some time now and to reflect on this morning's Old Testament reading. We have in this morning's Old Testament reading from Genesis 18 and 21 a glimpse of a much larger story, a much longer story about God and God's covenantal relationship with Abraham and his family. In today's reading, Abraham and Sarah, formerly Abram and Sarai, receive three unexpected visitors. And what Abraham and Sarah don't realize, at least at first, is that these are no ordinary men. The Lord is among them. Abraham goes out of his way to be a good host. He's showing levels of hospitality that seem foreign to our modern Western sensibilities, but they made perfect sense in his cultural context. He begs his visitors to stay and to rest. He rushes to tell Sarah to bake some bread and to instruct his servant to prepare a calf to feed them. He stands and watches as these three visitors eat and drink. The visitors ask Abraham where his wife Sarah is, making sure that she's within earshot and letting us know that she's an important player in what's about to unfold. And Abraham responds that she's nearby in a tent. As Sarah listens in on the conversation, one of the visitors says to Abraham, "I will surely return to you in due season, and your wife Sarah will have a son." The text reminds us here that both Sarah and Abraham are old. We know that they are 89 years old and 99 years old, respectively. So when Sarah hears the news, she laughs to herself and she says, "After I have grown old, and my husband is old, shall I have pleasure?" Sarah laughs at the absurdity of what she has just heard, but it's not just the absurdity of this image of an elderly woman giving birth to a baby. It's also the fact that this is not a new promise. It's been almost 25 years since God first spoke to Abram, calling him to a land that God would show him and promising to make him a great nation. God told Abram that his descendants would be as plentiful as the dust of the earth and the stars in the night sky, and that his heir would be his own son. Years went by and still no son for Abram and Sarai. So if you're familiar with the story, you know what happens next. They took matters into their own hands. Sarai gave Abram her slave Hagar, who bore Abram a son named Ishmael. And after another 13 years had passed, God again appeared to Abram, who is now 99 years old. God promised to give him a son through his wife Sarai, telling Abram that she would give birth to Isaac in 1 year. And God gave them new names, Abraham and Sarah, telling Abraham that he would be the father of many nations. When Abraham heard all of this, his response was to fall on the ground laughing. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. So is it any wonder that Sarah responds in a similar way when she finally gets the chance to hear this promise for herself shortly after the Lord's most recent appearance to Abraham? This is old news. They've heard this before, and Sarah has stopped hoping for this promise to be kept. When the Lord hears Sarah's response, hears her laughter, the Lord asks Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old?'" And then God follows it with another question. Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? Other Bible translations word it this way: is anything too hard for the Lord? Or is anything too difficult, impossible, or beyond the Lord? Behind these different words lies ambiguity. Is God asking Abraham and Sarah whether they believe God is capable of performing something so miraculous? Or, as Terence Fredheim puts it, is this about the extraordinary and marvelous acts of God? The claim that God's promises will not fail, that God will always find a way into the future. It may be that it's a little bit of both. What is clear about this question is that it's not put forth as a test. God is not quizzing Abraham and Sarah to make sure they give the right answer or as a means of shutting down discussion, just the opposite. In this question, God invites Sarah and Abraham into a conversation. They are invited to consider what they truly believe about God and what God can do. Ellen Davis writes that the key piece of good news that the Old Testament communicates over and over again is that God is involved with us deeply and irrevocably so. God wants Abraham and Sarah to wrestle with this question because God has entered into covenantal relationship with them. Do they trust God to keep God's word? Will they remain committed to this relationship? This same question, is anything too wonderful for God? This question is at the heart of our own life of faith. To follow Christ is to wrestle with this question. What do we believe about God and what God can do? As followers of Christ, this conversation between God and Abraham and Sarah has now been extended to us. We are a part of this conversation. When Abraham and Sarah are first presented with the question, their initial answer appears to be, well, yes, there are in fact things that are impossible for God. Both Abraham and Sarah laugh at the absurdity of this good news. Old women can't give birth to babies. Surely God knows that. And because today's Old Testament reading is two portions of two separate chapters that are combined to make one unified narrative, we miss the gap that's there between the Lord's visit to Abraham and Sarah in chapter 18 and the birth of Isaac in chapter 21. The visit ends with Sarah's fear and panic at being overheard in what she thought was a private moment of disbelief. She denies laughing, and the Lord pushes back, insisting that she has laughed. And that's how the scene ends, without any resolution. Do Sarah and Abraham accept what the Lord has said? Or do they continue to doubt God's promise until the moment their son has arrived and they're holding him in their arms, a living and breathing sign of the impossible things God can do? We don't know when this change occurs, but we know that it does, as evidenced by Sarah's words of joy at the birth of Isaac. She says, God has brought laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh with me. Who would ever have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children, yet I have borne him a son in his old age? Is anything too wonderful for God? This question still hangs in the air, but the weight of it has shifted. It's like a person who looks at their beloved with eyes of complete trust and proclaims, is there anything they can't do? Or like the psalmist who declares confidently, who is like the Lord our God? Again, Sarah laughs and she holds her son, whose name means laughter. But this time, her laughter is meant to be heard. She invites others to laugh with her as an act of worship for the God who does strange and wonderful things. Is anything too wonderful for God? We ask this question as we sit with our own unanswered prayers, waiting for healing, waiting for reconciliation in strained relationships, waiting for clarity as we make decisions that affect our future. We ask this question in the face of a global pandemic that has wreaked havoc on people's lives and on healthcare systems and economies on a global scale. We ask this question in the wake of the death of George Floyd, as our Black sisters and brothers cry out for justice, pleading with us to listen to their pain and to affirm that their lives do in fact matter. Is God worthy of our trust? Will God bring justice? Esau Macaulay writes this. He says, when I say that the resurrection is my hope for justice, it is not some everybody just needs to love one another and all will be well kind of claim. It is a statement about the scope of God's power to do the unthinkable. Amen. I saw this same spirit at yesterday's One rally downtown at the Liberty Pole. I wasn't able to be there in person, but I was so grateful for the chance to join via live stream and to pray and worship together in spirit. And I heard this message loud and clear, that the same power that raised Christ from the dead is at work in our world. breaking the strongholds of sin and death. Our God is still doing the impossible. Is anything too wonderful for God? If you're struggling to answer this question today, hear the good news from the beginning of Genesis 21. The Lord dealt with Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah as he had promised. God's faithfulness to Abraham and Sarah is not dependent on them providing the right answers to this question. Abraham and Sarah struggled to believe God's promise. After years of waiting, they doubted God's word. They tried to do things on their own terms, and in doing so, treated Hagar and Ishmael as objects to be used and discarded. But God's blessing wasn't a reward for a faith that was neat and tidy. God was faithful to Abraham and Sarah because that's who God is. And the God who was faithful to them will be faithful to us. Is anything too wonderful for God? We ask this question as we ponder what it means to be the church, the hands and feet of Christ. In today's gospel reading, Jesus instructs and empowers his disciples to go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, proclaiming the good news that the kingdom of heaven has come near, just as he himself has done. Alongside this proclamation, they are to cure the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, and cast out demons. After his resurrection, this mission will extend to the Gentiles as Jesus instructs his followers to make disciples of all nations. And although this talk of radical simplicity and persecution sounds strange in our context, we as the church have been tasked with the continuing work and ministry of Jesus in the world. As we pray the words that Christ has taught us to pray, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." We acknowledge that we are not passive bystanders waiting to see how God will act. God has given us a job to do. Is anything too wonderful for God? May these words become for us words of praise. Who can fathom this divine mystery? Who can comprehend the absurdity of a God who opens the womb of a 90-year-old woman and gives her a son? A God who defies our expectations and our preconceived ideas of what is possible. And may these words spur us to obedience as we seek to be the people who preach the gospel, who embody the peace of Christ, and who work for justice. We do all of this in the name of the one who does strange and wonderful things in and through us. Thanks be to God.